Good morning, Nashville. My name is Braden Gall, and this is the 440 for Tuesday, March 29th. It is Tuesday, which means Zach Lyons is here with us on a football show here from 440 Sports. Zach, always a pleasure to see you. BroadwaySportsMedia.com. Football and Other F Words is the podcast. How are you, sir? Good to talk to you.
Doing good. It's I had a great weekend. The F1 Saudi Arabia race was amazing. It was so much fun. So, I think F1 is slowly quickly becoming my second favorite sport. So it's must-see TV now. Must-watch viewing.
So as someone who's obsessed with the Drive to Survive documentary but doesn't actually watch the races, how accurate am I getting a portrayal of the sport in those documentaries?
100% accurate.
Because they're beautiful. They are beautiful.
Yeah. The race itself yesterday, the drivers from, they're in the pink cars. Anyway, they're in the pink cars.
Mercedes, McLaren, Red Bull, I don't know.
No, it's one of the mid-tier ones, but they were battling with each other for 3 laps. The teammates were, because they didn't want to, let the other one be ahead of them. So the drama is real, and the drama is able to be felt during the race.
We're going to talk about sort of the future of Nashville as it pertains to the Titan Stadium. We've had an IndyCar race around the Titan Stadium. Maybe we can get an F1 race to come to town. Maybe that's the next thing Nashville needs to try to acquire. So we will touch on the story. Of course, Nate Rao of Axios broke the story with a few more details about Governor Bill Lee's proposal. Old Billiam Lee, his proposal for potentially adding state dollars to the development of a Titan Stadium. So we'll touch on that real quickly here. But the vast majority of the show, we're going to focus on sort of grading the Titans offseason up until this point, because now we are in sort of full-fledged draft mode. And so, Zach, we're going to run through your grades and look at all the resignings, the restructuring, some of the players that have been tendered and returning, some of the acquisitions, whether it's trade or free agency, and some of the guys they've cut. And we'll just sort of look at the whole big strategy so far of Jon Robinson and see what you think about that. Of course, we'll tease what's coming up on the website for Broadway Sports Media, which is a deep dive into the look at how trading up for quarterbacks has looked and has worked for people. Some interesting data there. You're going to have a really big piece on Broadway Sports Media coming up soon, so we'll touch on that, and then we'll complain and whine about award shows and spring practice a little bit later on in the show. However, before we do any of that, make sure you remember this Saturday, April 2nd, the 8th annual J.E. Dunn Hammer Down Race. It's a 5K. All the money goes to benefit our kids. Of course, a wonderful organization here in Nashville that helps treat and care for sexually abused children. I've been a member of the board for, 5 or 6 years, and the J.E. Dunn Hammer Down 5K, 8th annual this Saturday. We need runners. Dawn Davenport's going to be there hanging out, so why don't you come on out? Hammerdown.raceroster.com, hammerdown.raceroster.com. Okay, Zach, a couple of the details from Nate's report. Again, go read about it. $500 million of state dollars from Bill Lee. Again, ballpark figure here is about $2 billion roughly for a new stadium, give or take, depending on what that looks. But a few things that were in the report as sort of mandatory to get this money. It was going to be built. The new stadium will be built east of Nissan Stadium, so closer to the interstate. I believe that's parking lots A through D, which is that's an interesting tidbit there. There would have to be a retractable or domed roof so that they could go out and get the Super Bowl, the Final Four, the college football playoff, maybe some winter concerts as well. Obviously, be tied into a lot more development down there, and that there's a contingency on, you have to have a broader financial agreement between the Titans and the city. So this is just a small piece of it, but it is some interesting reporting. What did you make of the report and some of the details that are in there, Zach? How do you feel about some of those?
Well, I feel good. I mean, you're talking about the state putting in $500 million, which is 100 and something counties, across Tennessee, splitting up the bill in some form or fashion. And to me, it seems like a good deal. I don't see why anybody is going to be upset in the big scheme of things. But, you got people out here talking about, I've been to a bunch of dome games, they just don't have the same atmosphere as being outside. And then some PSL ticket holders are already saying that what's next? I'm going to be priced out of my PSLs. Why don't they care about the current PSL holders? Well, let me tell you why. Because they don't give a shit about you, because they give a shit about profit. You are not included in the profit because if you drop your PSLs, there is going to be someone that previously wasn't a PSL ticket holder that's coming in to buy PSLs at the price that you decided not to. It's not like they're going to lose money if they lose you. It's bad business to think about the people that what are they going to do? Turn down all these events just because a few PSL holders are little bitchies? I mean, they're just bitching around constantly.
Wow, little bitchies.
Little bitchies. I kind of got stuck with there. I was going to say bitches or bitching. So I just went,
you got to be committed,
bitchies.
Zach. You got to be committed. Although I do like the new one. I think that new one's interesting.
It's just people just can't be happy. And to me, this is a great thing for the city. It's a great thing for the team. It's a great thing for everybody involved, except for, like 5 people.
Well, what's going to be fascinating, and first of all, if the stadium brings in all these other events and is this big, beautiful, brand new thing that sort of takes us to another level from a sports standpoint, and Amy Adams Strunk decides, and the Strunk family and the ownership, the Titans, decide to foot a big chunk of the bill. Let's call it half, whatever the number is, half. Then I think eventually that's gonna come back down to you a little bit, whether you're paying for PSLs or they have to run a business here. To your point. But I think she would earn a ton of goodwill if she decided to. She's already one of the most popular humans in the city. What's fascinating about this, and again, I recommend going and listening to our conversation with Nate a couple of weeks ago on Lamestream Sports, who laid out all the details of this. There will be a mayoral election next year, and in the height of the mayoral election, we will be trying to answer the question, how much do we as a city want to spend on a stadium, which generally, when you ask billionaires for money, is not normally a popular thing. I think we all agree we want the Titans here, so that's the starting point. And after that, it's, I don't think you can stop the development of the East Bank from happening. I just don't think you can. I think it's going to happen all the way up to the Oracle facility and all the way, hopefully, past PNC Metals. To me, this screams massive development coming on top of the Titan Stadium, around the Titan Stadium. And while I don't love that idea, you have to connect it to Broadway at some point. So, again, what does this all mean? There's a long way to go. I'm with you. I'd like it to, or what you were talking about, Zach, is I do want some form of open airness.
Yeah, I'm all about the retractable roof over a dome. If I have to choose one or the other, it's retractable roof, no doubt.
Or make it make the concourses again. If you go to the soccer stadium, the concourses are all open air, so that you can flow and you can see the field no matter where you're walking in the concourse. Like at Nissan Stadium now, it's just a bunch of cinder block walls that keep you from seeing anything that's happening out in the bowl when you go to get a beer or go to the bathroom. So I think there's ways to make it more open and more airy, even if you've got some form of roof on top. But I'm with you on the retractable. I just think people need to understand that these are very large market forces at play, and we can't really stop a lot of them from happening, but we can negotiate around the edges, and that's what happened with the soccer stadium, right? Is that they got a pretty damn good deal, the city did, and that stadium is largely being paid for, almost all of it by ownership. So how much can we get ownership and the NFL to pony up here, I think is the question.
Yeah, I just think that we don't have all the facts yet, and I think to go ahead and say, well, I can't believe that it's affecting me in this large way when you really don't know how it's affecting you yet. We don't really know the repercussions from the state putting this in, quite honestly, down to, for the citizens of Tennessee. We don't know what the city's going to put in, how much, how will that affect everything? So, I mean, right now it's kind of a wait and see mode in the cost for Davidson County residents, which I'm not one of. So I really don't give a shit about you guys. I'm out of Davidson County. I'm in Sumner County. Fuck it.
Well, what's funny about that is that you're going to have a lot of those counties, though, that's where the state money will affect. Like the small counties out and around in middle of nowhere, Tennessee, that's where some of that money actually would come from. Whereas, again, Erie, this is going back to the Bills, the NFL and the Bills are ponying up a big chunk of cash. I want to say $500 million. Erie County, where Buffalo's located, is about $250 million. And then the state of New York is kind of putting up the rest. I want to say it's $800-900 million, something around those numbers. So again, there's the state, there's the city, and there's the organization and the NFL. And how do we get that all to work for us long term? We decided a long time ago we're a pro sports town. We have 3 professional franchises in this city. We are a pro sports town. We decided that 2 decades ago. The question is how to make it all work best for everybody and maybe get a Super Bowl out of the deal, right?
Right. And that's the big thing, right? I mean, you get the Super Bowl, you get WrestleMania, you get concerts, you get the NCAA. You get WrestleMania. That's a big event.
I listen, I'm all for big events and their money spends. But if you're going to list off events, let's go Super Bowl, college football playoff, national championship, Final Four. Let's do some of that before we get to WrestleMania.
Now, WrestleMania's got the biggest name recognition out there. I went to the Dallas WrestleMania, and you're talking about it. And I've been to 2 Super Bowls, and it has the feeling of a Super Bowl. People just do not, you don't understand it until you experience it. You'll get a little bit of glimpse of it when SummerSlam comes here, which is the WrestleMania of the summer for wrestling, which is coming this summer. But it's not going to be as big as what WrestleMania would be.
I'm on the edge of my seat, Zach. I'm on the edge of my
Should
seat.
be.
WrestleMania and spring practice and award shows are all in the same category for me, but we'll get to that a little bit later on. Hey, but the money spends. That's what matters to the city. The money spends. All right, let's get into the offseason here because we are in full sort of pre-draft mode now, right? We're about a month away from the draft, a little less than. Most of the big movement that has happened in whether it's restructuring contracts, cutting players, signing free agents, re-signing guys, the vast majority of that has happened. Do you think there's any big things coming between now and the draft outside of focusing on maybe trading draft picks or like, I feel like the Titans have done what they're going to do, right?
Yeah, I think right now the list, and Mike Clay of the NFL and ESPN, he keeps a running list of available free agents, and the list is still jam-packed with names. And this happens every year, right? You see this list of names, and then you're like, how are these people still available? Well, then you get a report about Jarvis Landry demanding $20 million a year. Like, give me a fucking break, Jarvis Landry. Well, you're not getting that. I wish I could get $20 million a year, but let's be realistic. You know,
I think you could average 9.8 yards a catch. I
would like it. If I could, then I deserve to get paid $20 million just for my level of being able to do that. You know, you still got guards out there like Eric Flowers, and you got offensive line help. I don't think that, you know, obviously what Mike Vrabel said on Monday, he talked about Jamarco Jones, and, you know, he'll get his start at left guard, which means that when training camp rolls around, he's going to be in the mix to compete for left guard. They're not going to put him at right tackle. That's what that means. But that doesn't mean that they still can't upgrade that spot and bring in either a rookie or a veteran. I think the big names are pretty much done. I think they obviously have a whole roster to fill out still to go. I mean, I think they only got like 60 players under contract, which means they still need 30 more technically by the time the offseason starts, because you typically want 90 players. So we'll see. I mean, I wouldn't get too excited that I think like if you get Keelan Cole as a wide receiver, for example, or Will Fuller or some of these guys, it doesn't move the needle much, but they're going to be cheap, and you're getting cheap above average veterans for most of these spots that they still have open.
Yeah, I think like some extra offensive line depth or a player like Will Fuller, who we know what he can do well, which is take the top off and take those shots deep. And he scores touchdowns at like a ridiculous rate. I think that's the kind of player that even though you're going to lose him for like PEDs for 3 games and injury for 3 games, the other 8 or 9 games, he probably would be pretty effective next to Robert Woods, especially if you don't know how long Robert Woods' recovery is going to be. All right, so let's kind of group these into some categories here, 3 different categories, and get your grades on these. We'll do sort of cuts and guys they decided to not bring back. We'll put that into a category. We will put acquisitions into a category, so new pieces that have come to the Titans that will be new on the team this year. That would include Austin Hooper, Robert Woods, guys we talked about last week, and then sort of the re-sign, restructure, return, sort of management of the current assets. So let's start right there. Harold Landry, the big contract, Ben Jones, we talked about them. They restructured Kevin Byard and Zach Cunningham. They re-signed basically, and again, you can call this whatever you want here, but Randy Bullock, Jeff Swain, Ola Adeniyi, Dalton Hilliard, Buster Screen. There's a lot of guys like that on that tier. So how are we grading out on what Jon Robinson accomplished with that collection of players, the re-sign, restructure, return group of guys?
Well, I mean, they got an A- kind of grade for those, because I'm looking at the extensions that they did, which was Jeff Swain, Ben Jones, or extensions / re-signings, Jeff Swain, Ben Jones, Harold Landry. And you got to include Mike Vrabel and Jon Robinson. Those are the 2 biggest ones. They're the 2 biggest extensions that got signed this year. And the extensions, B+. Like those list of 5 moves are B+, because Swain is a D. It's a horrible signing, because you look at OJ Howard, and we could have got OJ Howard in a 2-tone blue uniform instead of getting Jeff Swain for the same amount of money. Like, it just,
I would do that in 2 seconds. I would take OJ
Right.
Howard.
I
Yeah.
mean, everybody should. And I think this was an overreaction. You still got Jeff Swaim defenders out there, which I don't even
Swaim
partake.
stands?
Jeff Swaim stands
Wow.
exist, Braden. And then you got like the restructures of Kevin Byard, Zach Cunningham, Brett Kern. Give it an A, because Kevin Byard, you had to add 2 void years. So that kind of hurts it. But Brett Kern took a $1 million pay cut. Zach Cunningham was a no-brainer. Everybody predicted that he was going to get restructured. There were a few people who thought he was going to get cut, which they're morons, because they don't know what they're talking about. And then you got the restricted free agent tenders, Woodside and Tart, and Tart's an A, Woodside's a B+. I mean, you look at these, right there. I mean, that's a whole list of players that when you talk about a team that's not very active in free agency, you got to include the moves they make with their own players in how active they were. Harold Landry, Ben Jones being the 2 biggest acquisitions that the Titans really made. Technically, their acquisitions, or the moves that they make. So you got to include that into all this.
I think the restructuring on both Byard and Cunningham is excellent. I think those are great moves. I think bringing back Landry, especially looking at some of the costs that were floated for other pieces at his position around, I still
think it's a slight overpay. I had him at a B.
It might, it could be an overpay and still be fair relative to other people. Like same thing with Ben, and Ben Jones is just like from a value standpoint. If you tell me again, the guys, I think he started. Don't quote me on this, but I want to say 96 out of 97 games that he could play. And we talked about this a couple of weeks ago. But if he's going to play, let's say 16 out of 17 games, he will be worth way more than his contract that he signed this offseason. So, and then old Randy bringing him back. I think Ola and Hilliard are 2 nice pieces. I like those guys as value pieces. I'm with you on Swaim, but whatever. So then if we're going to talk about managing current assets as part of the kind of free agent-ish type moves for Jon Robinson, you have to talk about the assets that they are no longer managing, but that they had on the team. And a lot of these were fairly predictable. Julio Jones, Roger Saffold, and Jackrabbit Jenkins were the 3 big ones that were sort of circled on everybody's list when we went into free agency. Kari Blossom game, Rashawn Evans, Jayon Brown, Dante Foreman, all those guys. I would have liked to see Foreman maybe brought back, but I understand why you don't. I have long been a Jayon Brown fan. I just like his game, but he's undersized. He's been hurt a lot. So maybe they think they've got a replacement in David Long ready to go. Also, you got Kendall Lamb. He was on the team last year.
Yeah, he was there.
He's not on the team anymore.
He was a guy.
So how are we grading the decisions to move on from all of these pieces and or some of the pieces they're not going to resign, like Rashawn Evans and Jayon Brown?
An A. I mean, these are all no-brain decisions that my biggest beef is the Julio Jones trade or the Julio Jones cut, but that was that move now makes sense because it tied into the Robert Woods trade, which is an A+ trade, which we'll get to later. But I mean, none of these guys that you're losing are guys that really mattered anymore. I mean, Julio Jones and Roger Saffold, great players for what they are, but they're old.
Yeah.
And I mean, Roger's body's betraying him. Like the people in Buffalo have no clue what they're getting. Apparently they have not watched his pass protection just precipitously fall off for the last 3 years. And, that's not due to anything other than his body betraying him. And it's not that he, wants to suck. It's just that he kind of does suck in pass protection.
He failed a physical before becoming a Titan.
Yeah.
Like that's how he became a Titan. So again, I don't, this is not like rip on Roger Saffold time here on the show, because we both think that he's a really nice piece to this offense the last few years. But I'm with you. Like it's same thing as Julio. At some point, the cost of the asset outweighs the production, and you're concerned about the risk involved in carrying those expensive assets for the future. And that's it. Like you got to make a move on them if you think that's what's going to happen.
Yeah. The new Vikings GM, whose name escapes me and whose name I probably couldn't even pronounce anyway while reading it, because it's a very complicated name. He was interviewed talking about, managing expectations of a roster and how to handle all that. And he said the worst thing you can do as a GM is make a move, see that it was a mistake, and not move on from it. And in my opinion, Jon Robinson does that better than anybody else, is admitting that he makes a mistake and moving on from it. And that's what you saw with Julio Jones, what you've seen with Kevin Dodd, Isaiah Wilson.
Yep.
All these players that Darrington Evans is a good example, who is also been cut and he's over in Chicago.
Dude,
Jayon Brown
I
wasn't
got
even starting at the end of the year. He was a healthy scratch. So, I mean, you just cut bait. And
I got so much shit on Twitter for the night that they drafted Darrington Evans. I was like, because this was before Derrick Henry had been signed and had his new contract. And I was just like, you better, if you're going to draft a running back in the 3rd round, you either are more concerned with Derrick Henry leaving or he's going to play a much bigger role in the offense, because that's what a 3rd round asset is supposed to do. And I just got, it was like I went into the fetal position that night. The Titans fans treated me so poorly. And I still think injuries, you can't predict injuries. I don't fault the GM for taking a guy who just ends up being injured. That's just unfortunate sometimes. But you're right. Like, he will admit his mistake and move on quicker than almost any GM. And do you want all those mistakes to keep piling up? Of course not. But part of the job as a GM is you're going to miss on some guys. That's just that's the nature of the job. And so when you do, knowing how to get out from under it and not be pot committed and fold the cards, you got to be able to do that as fast as possible. And JR does that better than anybody.
Show me a perfect GM.
Yeah,
they don't exist. And
Nick Saban.
yeah. They just don't exist in this world that we live in. There is no proven system that works when you're evaluating talent. I mean, you talk about people all the time who have dedicated their life to scouting and watching film get it wrong all the time. And that's not just the GMs and scouts that get paid to do it. It's the people who do this on, TV. I mean, look at Mel Kiper. He has probably one of the worst hit rates of anybody talking about stuff. And Todd McShay and all those guys that get paid, they're not perfect, but they're giving you their honest assessment. Now, whether their assessment proves to be true or not, shit happens.
Just forget us, forget the media, and forget armchair quarterbacks, and forget armchair GMs. Just look at the people who get paid millions of dollars to make these decisions. They screw it up all the time. That's it.
All the time.
They screw it up all the time. So acquisitions. We spent a lot of time on this last week, so we don't need to spend a ton of time on this. But obviously, acquiring Robert Woods and Austin Hooper to provide 2 pieces for the offense and the passing game, pretty nice. But Josh Malone, Jordan Wilkins, Jamarco Jones, AJ Moore, like there's a lot of sort of smaller pieces here. They didn't go spend big on these pieces. They didn't spend much at all to get Robert Woods. There's certainly a salary cap hit there, but if Austin Hooper is your biggest acquisition from a cost standpoint, you played it pretty safe this offseason. So what are your thoughts on the new pieces?
I'd say a B- because Jordan Wilkins and Trenton Cannon really don't do anything for me. And they probably, them and Josh Malone, because Josh Malone technically is a part of this group too. They just don't do much. Jamarco Jones is a C. Like, if I was going to grade that signing, because he's not that great, but he could be better here in Tennessee, because let me tell you something. For everything and all the shit that David Quessenberry rightfully deserved to get, he was still a pretty good right tackle for an 31-year-old undrafted free agent with 3 full seasons under his belt or something like that. Like, he doesn't have a lot of seasons under there, and he played every snap at right tackle, and nobody knew who he was, really. I mean, and then don't forget, in 2020, when Taylor Lewan went down, then Tyson Braylo went down.
Yeah,
David Quessenberry stepped in and he filled in great. And maybe Jamarco Jones he's going to be more David Quessenberry than Kendall Lamb, right? Like, maybe, or let me put it this way. He's more Dennis Kelly than Kendall Lamb, but we don't really know.
That's what I was going to, what's fascinating about this is you can kind of argue it 2 different ways. Like, the right tackle, they just seem to solve the problem without trying very hard. That's one way to look at it, right? Like, it's Dennis Kelly. Okay, it's his job. Okay, Ty Sambrella, David Quessenberry. Like, they try with like the high draft picks and they didn't work. But when they try with these veteran journeyman players, they seem to work out well. We know that when you come to the Titans, you are probably going to get better. So that's also something you have to remember, that to your point about Jones, like, guys that show up at this organization generally leave it as better football players. So I don't know if it's pretty easy. They found guys to play that position before. They'll do it again. Or, man, why didn't they just keep the guy who did a good job last year? Like, the same thing with Dennis Kelly. Like, I don't know why they didn't just keep the guy who did a good job. So I think you could argue it both ways.
Yeah, it's interesting because when this new coaching staff really came to Nashville, that first year of Keith Carter was like, I think unanimously among fans, people hated him. Like, they thought he was just so bad. And really, he's become one of the better coaches on this staff.
Yep. Yep.
And I know that the offensive line had its struggles, but it's almost, it didn't matter when Taylor Lewan went out in 2020 because Ty Sembrano and David Quessenberry stepped in and you didn't really miss a beat. You still had run left in a 2,000-yard rusher, right? I mean,
yeah.
And I know David Quessenberry allowed a ton of pressures, right? And they all seem to come in waves, but there are at least, 5 or 7 games where he allowed 0 pressures. That's pretty good for an undrafted free agent who has played maybe 12 games his whole career. And he's 31. Like, that goes to show you that Keith Carter is doing a wonderful job with what he's given. Is he given enough? Probably not. But can he make it work? Yes, he can. And so I'm interested to see where Jamarco Jones ends up. Is he going to be, Dennis Kelly at left guard, or is he going to be Kendall Lamb at left guard?
Overall, I think to date, I would go a strong B+ for the work Jon Robinson has done. And I'm going to take Vrabel and Robinson's contract out of the equation just for the sake of this conversation, because they have to sign those guys. They're the ones in charge, and we're sort of grading them. And so to me, is this team, has it situated itself well enough to go into the draft and be right where it was at this time last year? And they addressed some personnel needs around Ryan Tannehill on offense in the passing game. They got rid of some hefty contracts. They re-signed that. They kept the pass rush together, which was the most impressive part of this entire team last year, especially down the stretch. So I think they've done all the things that they needed to do. Is it exactly the way we would have done it, or the right piece here, or Jeff Swaim there? I don't know. I would go B+, and if they have a good draft, I think you could have an A offseason if you're the Titans.
I think it's including Vrabel and J-Rob, that would be an A-. So you take them out, you're probably looking at a B+ grade. Because I did GPA calculations here. I mean, that's what I went off of. I averaged my grades and everything. So probably B+, which is, a lot better than what people think. A lot of people think they're, C- or an F and D, and just because they didn't get, the big names. But man, look at these contracts. Like, I think the Robert Woods trade that's really goes to show you.
That's like signing a giant free agent.
Yeah. To me, that really goes to show you that Jon Robinson on some of these trades just works on another level than everybody else. Because I mean, that's nothing. And for a very good player that, for all intents and purposes, on paper right now should be a big contributor for this team and big help. His press conference, him talking about that he's going to stand next to Ryan Tannehill and pick his play or pick his brain on the plays. Why is he going there? What does he expect of him? Even though he can't be out there. A lot better than what Julio Jones gave you. Just throwing that out there.
Also, I can't believe we waited this long to get this into the show, but Mike Vrabel also had, the greatest human in the NFL is Marcus Mariota.
It is true.
So we need to get it out there that no one is greater than him. Ryan Tannehill might be as great as Marcus Mariota, but is not a greater human being than Marcus Mariota. There is nobody greater than Marcus Mariota. So I think we got to make sure.
Ryan Tannehill is one press conference away from being slapped by Will Smith. I mean, that's like, because he just keeps taking shots everywhere, right? All these intended shots.
To some people's point, to some people's, like, other people arguing against this, like, nobody. This is what I tried to tell you last week on the show, which is that a receiver can be like, hey, this guy's a great leader, and this other guy could be a great leader too. Like, Marcus Mariota can be a great human being, and Ryan Tannehill can be a great human being. Like, they're mutually exclusive. They were never really joined together. And
right,
and frankly, I don't give a shit if you delete or don't delete tweets. I'm on team no delete, but I don't care. Like, who cares? Like, none of this matters. It's just, none of it matters. Anyway, Marcus Mariota's a good guy. Ryan Tannehill's a decent quarterback. Let's see if he can win a playoff game. How about that?
I mean, we live in a society right now where everything is the best and everything is the greatest whenever there's something that breaks out, right? Like,
or the other way.
This movie was the greatest thing ever. That pass was the greatest pass I've ever seen in my life. Or Buck on his show on Monday, he says, we as a society have never been captivated by an event more than the Will Smith slap. Oh, I don't know. 9/11 ring a bell, Buck? Like, I think that pretty much captivated everybody.
I mean, there's also something happening in Europe right now that's captured the entire world's attention for a lot longer than a slap in the face.
We live in a society of the latest thing is the best thing.
I agree. It's recency bias. It's hyperbole.
Yeah.
Anxiety and conflict sells, and that's why people like Buck sell you anxiety and conflict. So
Yeah.
we're going to give you like a little bit of conflict on the show, but hopefully it's not fabricated like the Will Smith, Chris Rock thing, in which case I completely believe that it was all fabricated. Now I'm just trolling all of you losers who care about award shows, because award shows are stupid, navel-gazing, self-absorbed events for rich people who think they're amazing. Anyway, all right. Good offseason so far for the Titans. I think they're in a good position to go into the draft, which leads us real quickly to a topic you're working on for an article on Broadway Sports Media. And we mentioned this on the show weeks ago. I think we were ahead of the curve on this, programming all of Nashville media, which
we tend, at least from my experience, Football Under the F Words is really an inspiration for a lot of national media topics or local media topics. We come to find out, we'll say something or write about something, and then we'll see another copycat article, or we'll see this topic on the air, which, hey, we love it.
So hang on. So are you claiming that you beat me to the Titans should trade up and draft a quarterback?
No. I'm just saying that
I inspired
in
you.
general, Football and Other F Words tends to be a trendsetter.
That is no argument there. No argument there. What's really ironic about the history, and you're going to dive really deep into this, so we can talk a little bit about it next week, but obviously Patrick Mahomes and Deshaun Watson are two, the Chiefs go from 27 to 10. The Texans go from 25 to 12. Ironically, Joe Flacco, who I think is a carbon copy of Ryan Tannehill, was also another one that, quote unquote, worked out. Baltimore went from 26 to 18 to get Joe Flacco. They end up winning a Super Bowl out of the deal because he had this one great postseason run. Well, a lot of these other names are huge busts, and you're going to go into more detail. But the point is that the Titans were at Sam Howell's pro day. The Titans have been evaluating quarterbacks. Jon Robinson's talked about it at the Combine, and we talked about it weeks ago on the show, which is, if you trust the evaluation process for Jon Robinson, and if he finds the person that he thinks is going to be the starting quarterback for this team for the next 10 years, the trade doesn't matter. You go get him, period, end of discussion. But you better believe. And
it's not that expensive, really, to be honest. But you as the GM got to believe in your guy, right? And that's what all these GMs that made these trades, I think there were two panic trades. I call them, I got them tiered up right now on my Excel spreadsheet. There's 24 or 26 quarterbacks, including the two from last year, Trey Lance and Justin Fields. Obviously jury's still out on them, but I look at JP Losman and Kyle Bowler from 2003 and 2004, and they're panic trades because they're the leftovers, right? And these teams are kind of panicking. Well, we don't really love these guys, but we got to get a quarterback. And so we're going to trade up for them. And, you look at it, when you look at the big scheme of how many quarterbacks are taken in a draft every year, and you add them up, because I'll be going back to 2001 on, because 2001 was Mike Vick. And
that would be considered, I would call that a successful trade. Like,
right. I would too.
To go from 5 to 1 to get Vick, I would say that's a huge move.
Like, you got Mike Vick, Joe Flacco, Deshaun Watson, Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen are all quarterbacks that people traded up for that are elite quarterbacks for that particular franchise in that time, yielding different results. It sort of worked with Jared Goff and Carson Wentz and Mark Sanchez, because you don't get to the Super Bowl those first times without Carson Wentz's 2017 and without Jared Goff's 2018 getting you there, right? It sort of worked.
Those are such weird ones. Like,
yeah. And Mark Sanchez got you to all those AFC championships, and
that's true.
He kind of lost, and and then you look at the injured quarterbacks, Teddy Bridgewater and RG3. RG3 could have been really special had it not been for injuries. When you look at some of these quarterbacks, you're just kind of like, okay, well, it wasn't franchise ending. It wasn't terrible. So when you look at when you really look at it, 14 of these 26 trades, including Trey Lance, Justin Fields, and RG3 and Teddy Bridgewater, didn't really hurt the franchise in the big scheme of things to do the trade up.
I think what's really important in all of this is to also remember the 2010 deadline, where Sam Bradford was on the old rookie wage scale, where Sam Bradford was given like $78 million guaranteed. And then Cam Newton the very next year in the 2011 draft had, pennies on the dollar in terms of what those contracts are worth. So when you do take a guy, it doesn't hurt your team nearly as much, because you can cut bait after 2 or 3 years, come back to the draft and get another one. Now, that's not what you want to do, because that means you've played bad football for a couple of years. But the idea is, and I think, again, what I like about the Titans situation in this. I don't know if all the quarterbacks are going to fly up the boards or if they're all going to drop down the boards. But either way, I think they're in a good position to either trade back and get a guy or watch what happens and maybe move up a few spots to grab a guy. So I don't see a Patrick Mahomes or a Josh Allen or a Lamar Jackson or, like, again, I don't see any of those guys in this class. I've long believed that Sam Howell has the best throwing arm in the entire class. He reminds me of Drew Brees. He's a little short, but he's got a brilliant arm. He can run around a little bit more athletic than you think, and he's played a ton of football in a system that likes to chuck it all around and run the football. So he's my guy. I don't know if he's a first-round grade, if he's flying up boards. I don't know if he's a second-round grade or a third. I don't know, but that's the guy I like. And if you can get him at 41, great. If you get him at 22 and you need to move up a couple spots to get him, just make sure that he's your guy. That's all that matters to me.
It wouldn't surprise me to see the Titans trade up for a quarterback, because if you have that sort of conviction about a player, you can't risk waiting till 26.
Yep.
And so if you have that conviction, just go ahead and go up and get him. And you hope that guy is the guy, because when you look at Taylor Lewan, Kevin Byard, Derrick Henry, you got a bunch of relatively older pieces that you're going to have to replace in the next few years at certain points in times. And it's a lot easier to do that if you have found your guy in a rookie quarterback. That means you can get better pieces in free agency because you don't have a large contract to worry about. And with the cap going up, it seems like right now is the perfect time. The evaluations that you read on the internet about certain players, you can't put so much stock into it that this is the worst quarterback class and none of these quarterbacks are going to work out. Do you really honestly think that that's mathematically going to be the case? Because you're going to be mathematically disproven. It's almost impossible that none of these quarterbacks work out. I think it's all about the landing spot, because Sam Darnold landed in one of the worst landing spots in the NFL, and they ruined him.
I think you're 100% right about the landing spot, but it's also about the cost. Like, if you get Drew Brees, Russell Wilson, Dak Prescott in the third round because of a number of different evaluation things, right? Like, Russell was too short, Drew Brees was too short, and you go to Dak Prescott and he had the DUI, and like there's a lot of things that causes a player to maybe fall or slip or whatever. Derek Carr was a second round pick. So it's more about, I don't think the entire class will be a failure. I just am not sure if any of the guys at the top are gonna, I think Kenny Pickett's gonna be a nice player in the NFL, but I don't think he's a star. So
I think Kenny Pickett's going to be like Mitch Trubisky, is that someone's going to trade up for him and he's not going to really do well, because the team that's probably trading up for him probably is not going to have the best of situations. Like, to me, the Steelers trading up for Kenny Pickett, he may have a fighting chance to do something. But if, let's say, the Detroit Lions traded up for Kenny Pickett, you're write his career off all you want.
I totally agree. If Malik Willis ends up in a place that is got a quarterback guru to finally tune his arm, I think he's got a chance to be very good. He's got all the talent in the world. The problem is he doesn't have, he needs refinement. Like, that's what Malik Willis needs. Like, Desmond Ridder, I don't know if you can coach the accuracy back into that guy. He's Kenny Pickett in terms of leadership and winning and all these other things, and has a bigger arm than Pickett. It's just not accurate. And I don't know.
I think his accuracy is tied into his delivery of the football. And I think that could be fixed, because his footwork is phenomenal and his pocket presence is fantastic and he makes good decisions. But you're right. He sells the ball pretty easily to wide open receivers. And obviously he's going to have to get that fixed. The thing that worries me about quarterbacks like Matt Corral and Sam Howell is the amount of RPOs they ran in college really aren't going to translate really well to most NFL offenses. So
that's true.
But much like Malik Willis, much like Josh Allen or Patrick Mahomes, Sam Howell, Malik Willis, they have NFL arm strength. And sometimes that's more important than anything else.
No, I that's why I like Howell. Is the only thing I don't question about him is the arm. He's got the NFL arm, and Malik Willis has the NFL arm too, and a bigger body, bigger size, can move around, doesn't have the accuracy. And when I say, I think it's important that, I don't know if everybody does this, but when I say I think he's got the best arm, I am combining strength and accuracy. Those are I'm putting them together. I'm not saying he's got the strongest arm. I'm saying he's got the best arm. To me, that means touch, accuracy, arm strength. You can make every throw in the book is sort of what I mean when I say that. So, all right. Real quickly here, award shows, spring practice. I don't know about you, man. I just can't. The amount of talk that goes on, and I'm a college football nerd, you know this, but what happens on a spring practice field is completely irrelevant to your life. Like, it's just not. Like, the fact that you are practicing is really important. but like getting something right or wrong, or that's the time to get something wrong is in spring practice. That's when you're supposed to learn from your mistakes and grow and get better. And who's running with the ones at Tennessee or running with the twos at LSU? Like, I just could not care less. In fact, award shows are the only thing I care less about than spring practice. I don't know if it's a host problem, or if we're too sensitive and we can't take jokes like clearly Will Smith can't. I don't know what it is, but I can't get into it, man. I can't get into either one of them. Am I wrong here?
You're 100% not wrong. I didn't even listen. I was so detached from social media last night. I didn't even know the Oscars were on. Didn't know the Will Smith thing happened until this morning.
I didn't
Which
either.
is great, because then you can just run through your timeline and see
Right.
these wonderful, wonderful memes and jokes and tweets that are just absolutely hilarious. And look, the whole Will Smith thing, that's been brewing since 2016. You know, you say stuff like that on a school bus or at grade school or elementary, high school to someone, you're probably, even at a bar, you're gonna get your shit slapped in.
Wait. So there's backstory between these two?
Oh yeah. There's a
okay.
huge backstory, because he went in on Jada for like 2 or 3 minutes because she boycotted the Oscars in 2016 for purposes surrounding Will Smith not getting a nomination.
But I'm not even gonna I think there's
if there wasn't a disease attached to it,
I understand.
I don't think that it would be a big deal. But you know, you see
also,
guys
he's a comedian. He's a comedian. He's supposed to tell jokes. Like, I don't know.
You know, like, I get it. I'm all about free speech and jokes, but sometimes there's consequences, man. I mean, like, if you say something out in public, right, and you there's a good chance you get your shit slapped in. You know, like,
that's fair.
You know, and I'll say this. Samuel L. Jackson kind of looked like he appreciated Will Smith doing it. So I don't know if there's some beef between Samuel L. Jackson and Chris Rock. And I mean, was that joke really even that funny? Because it's a G.I. Jane 1997 joke. Like, get some new material.
Yeah, the crime Rock. Is that here's the issue.
The crime is the bad joke.
Yes, the crime is always going to be not being funny. If you are funny, like, again, my wife doesn't understand why I love South Park, but I love South Park. South Park attacks everything. It doesn't matter if you have a disease or if it's a religious belief. Or, you know, like the most taboo stuff in the world, they're going to go hardcore after everything.
They'll definitely do something with this.
But they're funny about it. And if you're funny about it, I think we all need to be less offended all the time. Like, just laugh about it. If it's not funny, that's when people are like, oh, dude, that was offensive. I can't believe you went there. Like, it's.
Yeah.
And maybe that's an unfair standard, but I don't know. I didn't know there was that much backstory between them. I know there's a serious conversation about, you know, race in the Oscars and all that stuff. I get that that's an important thing. Just like, you know, the quarterback battle at LSU is probably important in spring practice, but whatever. Like, it's not that. To me, this is and I'm only trolling people a little bit when I say this, but when have the Oscars been less relevant, and when have they gotten more coverage than Monday morning after that happened?
Well, apparently there's a huge spike, you know, within 2 minutes of viewership, right?
I'm just saying.
I just
wouldn't put it past people to make money off something like that. Just saying.
I don't think anybody had a better night than Will Smith maybe in a long time, because Will Smith, you know, he goes up, defends his wife, slaps a man with no ramifications whatsoever, and then goes back down and just, you know, curses at him and yells at him from the thing, you know, keep my name out of your my wife's name out of your fucking mouth twice, which is great. I love it. I love that.
Even though he was dying laughing at the joke at first.
Yeah, I think it took a little bit to register what was happening, but there's a clip of, and I'm going to butcher her name, Lupita Nyong was sitting behind him. I think that was who was behind.
You sound like you watch a lot more award shows than you're admitting.
No, I watch a lot of Twitter today. So she was sitting behind him, and there's this freeze frame of her seeing Will Smith go into beast mode, and she's like, you know, shock. She's got that shock face. And then he wins an award, wins an Oscar, and then he goes to an after party, and there's video of him singing "Get Jiggy with It" and just celebrating. And it's awesome.
Clearly,
what a great night.
clearly he was so offended and distraught that he couldn't go dance and party and celebrate his award. I don't know. It feels awfully convenient that the Oscars had its most important moment in quite some time from a publicity standpoint. Just saying, I'll be full Q on the show today. It's fine. I don't mind doing that. I can play that role. I got no problems with that. Listen, and what? Okay, here's the disclaimer. I'll clear my throat here. Whatever a man and a woman or a couple wants to do in the privacy of their own home is their own business. But didn't she have like a thing with someone else? And I didn't see him get slapped. So I'm just throwing it out there.
Yeah, it's quite the there's quite the
a lot of
story and detailing, this whole thing. It's
lots
great.
of layers. And you know what? I would rather watch spring practice with third string offensive linemen running walkthroughs than watch that crap. Zach, what do you guys got coming up on the pod and the website? Obviously the quarterback draft stuff's coming up, so everybody get ready for that. Yeah,
we're going to be talking about a lot about the draft coming up. What does a draft look like? It basically is what I'm going to do. I'm going to do 2 different articles, hopefully this week. One of them is going to be, what does it look like if the Titans did trade up a la Kansas City to draft one of these quarterbacks and then they don't pick again till the 5th round? What does your draft look like at that? What does your team look like after that? And then I'm going to dive in and talk about the merits of trading up for your guy. And, there's going to be guys that you end up just being kind of middling franchise guys, kind of like a Ryan Tannehill, but they didn't trade up for him. They stuck and pick them. But there's going to be guys that you could have a good chance to get a franchise guy, and you got to take that. You got to take those shots when you can, if you believe it.
Yep, especially with a quarterback who could be off the books this time next season. So
right.
There you have it. Football and Other F Words is the podcast. Of course, you and Lebowski always doing great work over there. Broadway Sports Media is the website. Make sure you check all of that out. Make sure you're also going out on Saturday this weekend, April 2nd. The race is the J.E. Dunn Hammer Down 5K, the 8th annual, all the money benefiting, of course, the Our Kids Foundation here in Nashville. A wonderful group of people taking care of sexually abused children. Dawn Davenport will be the MC, so make sure you come on out. That's hammerdown.raceroster.com. That's hammerdown.raceroster.com is the website. J.E. Dunn, Hammer Down event benefiting Our Kids. For Zach Lyons, my name is Braden Gall. Thank you guys for listening. Subscribe, rate, review, push all the buttons we're asking you to push. We really, really appreciate it. This has been the 440 for Tuesday, March 29th.